have but one objective.
Purple color I see. Then you maintain the status.
December 7th, 19...
I'm gonna question a psychopath.
The Orby has not...
It's a really big shoe tonight.
Will you stifle yourself?
Hey! Won't be long.
Dynamite! Drop out, will you? Hello.
Thank you very much. Ooh, you call the dummy, you big dummy.
Well, if the shoe fits, step it.
Till next week. Nanu. Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Good evening, everybody. It is tonight's TV lineup right here on the DJB Productions Network. Make sure you're hitting that notification bell, hit the subscribe button, and leave us some comments down below. We have a great one we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to be talking about the 1979 made-for-television miniseries, Salem's Lot. Great movie. First, before we get into all the festivities of this great feature, let's talk about who's on the show. We got Matt Sunner.
Good evening.
There we go. We got Jason Leach.
Hola, good people.
And we got Chris Gordon.
Cheers, my friends.
Cheers, 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 cheers. Guys, we're going to talk about Salem's Lot tonight. It's a great, great miniseries. 1979. Starred the star of Starsky and Hutch. Starred Hutch. Matt, I forget all these people's names, to be honest.
David Soul.
David Soul.
David Soul, yeah.
So happy.
Rest in
So
peace,
happy.
brother.
Yes. And also the boy died last year too, I think, or just not recently. Yeah, I think he just recently died too. And it was an all-star cast. Matt, if you could bring up the cast list.
Sure thing.
We'll go through some of the big,
This will take me just
the big names there. But this was a made-for-television. It was a Stephen King adaptation of Salem's Lot, which is a story about a man who goes back to a town. He's a writer, and he goes back to this town, and the town's got a mysterious, I don't want to say benefactor, but he's got a mysterious neighbor there who turns out to be, for all intents and purposes, knows fucking Ferratu, basically. And for the time, and this is why I do love 70s horror stuff, practical makeup, they really did go all out. And even though you're like, all right, whatever, like by today's standards, such great makeup, such great scenes, some great acting. We lost Chris. Chris will be back in just a moment. Just amazing stuff. And then what we have, and when Matt brings up this list, we're going to talk about all the stars on here.
All right. We have David Soul playing Ben Mears.
Okay.
James Mason playing Richard Straker, who happens to be the vampire's familiar. Basically, he's his assistant.
It's the Renfield.
Bonnie Bedelia
Yes.
plays Ben Mears' girlfriend when he gets in town, meets her.
Right.
Julie Cobb, Elijah Cook Jr., George, I always screw up his name, but Zunza.
Yes.
DZUNZ, a character actor. You'd seen him in he was a ton of stuff through the late 70s and 80s. Jeffrey Lewis.
Now there's a big one right there.
Yeah.
And at that time, Jeffrey Lewis was in Any Which Way You Can, Any Which Way But Loose. More after this, he was in Night of the Comet and a bunch of other stuff. His daughter, super famous as well, who was in From Dusk Till Dawn. She was in Christmas Vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And a number of other stuff too. So
actually, let me see while we're doing this. See if I can actually pull up IMDb here on the computer and share it, because some of these actors, just by the name, some people might not recognize them, but when you see their face, it's like, oh yeah, I saw him in everything.
Another big one in there was Fred Willard.
Willard. Yeah.
He was a big one, and he was someone that did a lot of comedy on television in the 70s and the 80s. He did a lot of voiceover work, even up and through recently. He died, I think, not that long ago too. But I mean, just an all-star cast. And
Yeah,
when
well, yeah, James Mason.
James Mason, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who played Count Vorlock or whatever the fuck his name was in this movie? Because he wasn't
It
Count
was
Vorlock.
Mr. Barlow.
Mr. Barlow, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So David Soul was the
and then
David Soul was the protagonist, the main character, the dude, right?
Yeah.
I was actually surprised to find
Ben.
out. I was actually surprised to find out that he's an English guy.
Who? David Soul?
Yeah.
Is he really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
He's hiding his accent the whole time.
Well, he was an American and British actor. But yeah, you're right. He was Hutch. He was
Hutch.
And then you had, James Mason was like probably the big cachet that they wanted to bring in.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
But like Jeffrey Lewis was like seen in everything in that
movie. And then Lance Michael Kerwin was the kid.
Yes. And he just recently passed away. 60-something years old, I think.
Really?
Yeah. He just recently passed away.
Wow. Okay.
And he didn't really do much after the 70s, I don't think.
I didn't see him in anything after the 70s.
No, I don't think he did it. And he was another one that had like he had like like something going. You know what I mean? Like he was very popular when he was in stuff. His acting was good. But we're going to talk about this.
Oh no, I thought he did a great job.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about going back to a 10. Don't play the trailer because I got the trailer already. What are you doing, Matthew? Matthew, what are you playing? Matthew's doing a bunch of stuff on his computer.
Here we go. Yeah. Here, let me switch back over here to studio mode and just kind of.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Anyway,
I'm trying to pull up IMDb. Trying to pull up IMDb so we can.
And man, as a DJ, you don't play somebody else's music when they're going to play it. That.
So Danny and Matt are probably too young to know, but like Salem's Lot was the first like mini series of a Stephen King story. I'm sure Chris can back me up here. That was so overly successful that every year after that there had to be another miniseries by Stephen King. I mean, they did it. They did the Langoliers, and every single one of them was an ensemble cast for that time. You know what I mean? Like if you look at it, it had John Ritter, it had a John Boy from the Waltons. Like everybody on there was somebody at that time. So they always had. I don't want to say A-list celebrities, but for the time they were the hot commodities. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the Stephen King miniseries were hugely successful, like all through the 80s and maybe even early 90s.
Well, definitely through the early 90s too, because the interesting thing that you brought that up was, we know, speaking of Stephen King, we know The Shining from the Jack Nicholson.
Yes.
Right. Well, that was a Stanley Kubrick interpretation, and Stephen King was never happy with the outcome of that movie.
Correct.
No, he was not.
Kubrick made it his thing, and hats off to Kubrick because scary as fuck.
Yeah.
Man, that movie was so bizarre because I saw it on the big screen. And I remember getting in trouble that night because I had no idea how long the movie was, and I went and saw it on a school night. I get in so late, man. I anyway, that's not important. But when they did the TV series, where that was much more closely adapted to the book, and it was Rebecca De Mornay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And there were moments in that film, in that series, I should say, that like towards the end, when he's in the boiler room and he starts to transform, which you never see in the Kubrick thing. That shit really scared me. I was like, holy, like, wow, this is what, because I read The Shining, And I
Right.
remember, of course, I was young when I saw The Shining in the theaters. So when I read the book, I'm like, this isn't the movie. When is he going? When is he going to the naked ladies' room? What chapter do I need to go to? Anyway, the thing is that that was getting to your point about how the series, the miniseries that these
Yes.
were much closer to King's vision of
Mhm.
because it's the only way. If all of us have read Stephen King books, take a month out of your life.
Well,
there's so many subtexts and side things going on that that you can't really put it into a movie.
yeah,
Right.
it's one of the things that he became pardon the pun, the king of horror, because the fact his books were so well done. He did such a great job of character development and setting stuff up, that like little small things that if you weren't paying attention as you read it, something would happen later on in the story that
Right.
called back to
Right.
that. And it's so hard to really translate his stuff to film without having to trim and figure out what do you keep, what do you not keep.
Right.
And it becomes tricky. It becomes tricky to really give a good good translation of his work to the screen.
Right.
And you know what
exactly.
though, with
Yeah.
Stephen King though, he also wasn't someone that, like, you ever hear a lot of things where they're like, I can't stand it, and I won't even I renounced the movie completely, blah blah blah. There's authors like that. Stephen King was not like that. He did, hold a standard, but he was able to come to a good agreement and a good sentence with what the product was.
Yeah.
And or it didn't go out.
Yeah.
And he made money. So for a fact, like you said, with the Langoliers, with didn't he write? He was in Creep Show.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
started.
did. Yeah,
He wrote that particular story, right?
That
one
was
he was in?
him and George Romero doing that together. But I
Yeah.
think he was the sole author of that particular
that story.
segment.
Right, exactly. So I mean, like he really capitalized on the opportunity that it was. I think it with a lot of authors, with a lot of artists, it gets in their way for it to be too much. You know what I mean? Like no, this has to be exact. It can't. And there's always got to be an adaptation. There's always got to be a an alteration just because of translation. A book can always be more descriptive than a movie can, but you don't have as much time with a movie. I always translate, like when we talk about comic book movies and stuff like that, 5 years of comics, you can't really fit in 2.5 hours of a movie. So I equate it to a person's life versus a dog's life. The movie has an expiration date that's much closer to the beginning. So therefore, you got to get in, you got to get out, and you got to make it make sense, of course. Right. So I mean, Stephen King has done a phenomenal job in that, and this is, quite frankly, and you can talk to a lot of people, one of the most favorite adaptions of anything he's done, and it really is. It's fantastic. It was 3 nights. It was epic. It kept you going. And it's funny because it's 3 nights, but it's only like 3.5 hours, I think.
Yeah, it's because again, I was rewatching it last night to just kind of refresh my memory.
Okay.
And I started it so late, it was like fine. I had to go to bed because I was like over 2 hours into it, and I think on my DVD, I think it's the total runtime, with it now being commercials taken out, whatever, is like 3 hours and 5 minutes.
Right. So it's an average MCU movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you know what I mean? Like, think about that for a second. Like, we grew up, like you said, after with miniseries in general, 5 nights.
Yeah.
The Thornbirds, that was a big thing in the 80s.
Yeah.
And it was 5 nights, Monday through Friday. We had that, and it was on for 2 hours. So it was 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 hours of.
And if you were going to miss one, you better had a VCR, otherwise you were screwed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, so at least
No
this
streaming.
was at least this was digestible, which was great. with that too. And it stayed really like, it's funny because it in a way it does tell a classic vampire story. It really does. Like he has a Renfield. He has like he has a town that suspect him but don't suspect him. He has one guy who's like the Van Helsing of the group. You know what I mean? And it's really just a Dracula story, just told with different things, but it was told in such a way that like you forget that you've already heard the story, and you're just like enthralled with everything goes on. And once again, going back to it being in the 70s, the practical effects and the practical makeup on this film were unreal. They were great.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
And,
I mean it was one of those things too, and like I really loved, and I'm gonna pop this up here in a second. Because, you know, I mean, anybody who's watching this has probably seen it, so you know these are not spoilers. But it was the first time I can recall that we ever saw a vampire that looked like a monster.
Yeah, I'll make it big real quick.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt.
Yeah, I mean this. Oh, I made you smoke it
Because you always had them being, you know, debonair, rich millionaires. And
yeah,
like
I mean,
that.
look at that thing.
That's just straight evil, man.
That's a scary thing. Like the devil is not that scary.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so classic when they open up his coffin and you see it later, and then those eyes flash open in that mouth, and it's like,
and you know what's funny?
Holy crap!
If you keep that up there for a second, if you look at his face, right, this is almost identical to the dream sequence in Werewolf in London.
Yes.
American Werewolf in London. It's almost identical, like to the eyes and everything, just like minus the bald head. That's what David looked like in that dream sequence.
Yes.
You know, so I mean, like I don't know. I wasn't on the cutting room floor, but I would have to say that this influenced a lot of makeup artists in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? And I mean, that's just great. And it's scary as hell.
You know, for me, as far as vampire things go, to me, that was the way Barlow, right? That was the name.
Yeah. Mr. Barlow.
Mr. Barlow. That's what a vampire would be. If I was to imagine what a vampire would be, that's what it would be. It would be that. It would be something that is not walking among the living. It's doing it, you know, it's not the way it was depicted in that movie, whether, you know, and I have to admit, I haven't reread Salem's Lot in a long time, but the way he was depicted in that 1979 made for television series was perfect to me. That's what a vampire is. Like, that's what I would expect a vampire to look like.
And you know what, to your point though too, there's nothing charming about Mr. Barlow.
No.
You know what I mean? That's why he has his familiar. That's why he has the whole town becoming vampires, so they could do his bidding. But
I also like the fact that James Mason's character, right? The character, you know, who cared for, right? Yeah. He wasn't the typical Renfield. He was he was the opposite. He was a very together, you know, and if there was to be a vampire among the living, that was, you know, that's what you would expect somebody to be caring for him. Somebody who understood finances, who was probably making business deals overseas, multi-millionaire, you know, probably invested in everything, including politicians. And that's the guy that you want caring for you while you're out, you know.
Well, he obviously found him on Indeed, because he had a really good employee that he was able to hire. You know what I mean? We're about halfway through the show here. What I'm going to do, I have, for those of you who are maybe too young to even watch this, maybe just heard of it or whatever, I happen to have the trailer. It's a nice extended trailer. I'm going to play for us now, and then we'll be back with more Salem's Lot right here on tonight's TV lineup.
Ben Mears has been away too long. And now at last, he's come home.
My men fought at Valley Forge.
Daddy, come back safe.
Home to the childhood memories, to the old familiar faces. to a life unmolested by time.
And with your saints, let him rejoice in your presence forever. We ask it through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Home to Salem's Lot, a town too good to be true.
What was that?
Did you happen to notice the time when the boys left?
We shouldn't have gone through the woods.
It's a shortcut.
Well, then they should have been here half an hour ago.
Wait! Danny, wait!
Something is happening. Something terrible.
Henry! Where's Ralphie? Well,
Where's your brother?
First the kid disappears, then this. You're not leaving Salem's Lot, are you?
I'm not leaving. Don't you understand what's happening?
do you?
Yes, I do. It's in the Marston house. Good evening. I dreamed. You slept there all night? Yeah. A little tired. Didn't sleep much last night. I was dreaming. Somebody out there.
Sweet dreams.
I let him in.
Oh, it's only all just happened
Since I came here.
It wasn't a dream.
Stop, holy man! You can do nothing against the master.
They're breeding on one another. The vampires are creating vampires.
The master wants you.
It's a geometric progression. 2 times 2 times 4 times 8.
There's a dead man upstairs.
Bill! Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil.
Look at me. Ned Tibbetts' body has disappeared from the morgue.
Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Bill!
And Susan's in there. Run! No! Look at him!
Stephen King, the best-selling author of Carrie and The Shining, takes you on a startling journey to Salem's Lot.
Stephen King already cemented himself with Carrie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And other like iconic movies. And then this came out, and this is made for television, and like ridiculous. And for me, scarier than The Exorcist.
And you had the benefit too of it being directed by Tobe Hooper too, who did Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
So I mean, there was
correct.
There's a lot of those tones in that too. I'm glad you brought that up. There's a lot of those tones.
This movie, I mean, when I look back on this thing, it's like I kind of have a love-hate with it because, you know, having read the book, it's like it is done so well, especially considering the fact it was made for network television.
Yeah.
And it remained.
Well, it was also 1979. People
Yeah.
had thicker skin then.
Yeah, and
couldn't
also,
do that today.
Yeah, but they maintained with what they couldn't get away with for network television.
Yeah.
They made such good use of just making it so totally creepy. I mean, you know, little Ralphie Glick, you know, scratching at the window for his brother.
And
that
shit stayed with me for a month.
Let me tell you something.
And then we
a
see
month,
in that
man.
trailer.
That shit. Oh fuck.
And in that trailer,
man.
Jeffrey Lewis sitting in that chair.
How
and
scary was he?
You know, and it's just all that blue light. He's all in shadow, except for
And
those
his eyes are lit in the dark.
gold eyes.
Yes.
You know, look at me. You know, like yeah.
But think about that
sorry.
for a second. They
No.
they took a child and made a child. That's fucking scary,
That's
right?
scary.
So that like anybody watching it below the age of like say 18, who's like, oh my god, this is like my friend could do this.
Yeah.
Like now it's no longer like this grown up. You know what I mean? This is a kid. And a funny story, like where I grew up, we had a 3-story house, and my oldest sister was in the top floor, right? And my brother was in the room directly below her. So right around the time of Salem's Lot, it was out and stuff like that, and she watched it and blah blah blah. My brother got out onto the roof and with a ladder and climbed up to her window and started scratching on the windows, right? And she's in an attic, right? So she fucking ran into the closet screaming and locked herself in the closet for an hour. Right. And this is someone who was, I think at this point, 19 years old. But that's how petrified this movie made her. Now, granted, you can like say boo to her and she'll get scared right now. But like, you know what I'm saying? But I'm saying like that's the kind of craziness that this movie, like what Chris said, it stuck with you. Yeah. It was some scary, scary shit. And everybody will sit there and say, oh, well, The Exorcist, such a scary movie. Blah, blah. And wonderfully written and scary movie. But guess what? This was scary. This was scary as hell.
It was scary without having to resort to a lot of gore, which you couldn't have done at that point on television.
And that's a credit to the writing.
I mean, they took it right up here, and we're going to sit here and we're going to go as far as we can go.
Yes,
and we're going to make it creepy and scary and just. It's going to leave you unsettled. It's going to leave you unsettled when you're done watching.
If you think of, what you said, like with, William Toby Hooper, and maybe taking a cue from a few years earlier with Spielberg, where it was what you don't see that the audience, and a lot of that stuff in that era of time in the 70s, when I was, because this was the early years of cable.
Yes.
Very early years of cable television. And I remember hanging out with my buddies, and we didn't have cable until later, but they did. And I remember watching late night horror movies on cable, and those horror movies were based more on what you like. It was what you didn't see, but you knew was there, and it left it here. And they did that in Jaws. They did that in Jaws, and that wasn't by design.
Right.
He wanted a lot more of the shark, but the shark sucked. So he's like, oh, God, I fucking re-edit this. But if you take a look at Salem's Lot, like I said, the depiction of the vampire was perfect, but it was also just the building. It was the perfect composition of music, where it's building, and then it happens. Where you didn't need that stuff. You didn't need that stuff. And to me, and I stand by this, the Salem's Lot is still a scarier movie than any CGI movie you can show me today.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because it gets inside here.
Yeah.
Once again, it goes back to the writing. It goes back to the writing.
It's all psychological. It doesn't rely heavily on the imagery.
Right.
The imagery that it does use is highly effective without going like, how crazy over the top can we make this? And like you said, Chris, it lets your imagination fill in the blanks.
Right, which is scarier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because
it's fucking scarier.
Because ultimately everybody imagines what I consider to be the scariest thing I could have possibly imagined is not going to be the same as yours or Dan's or Jason's. So for all of us get an equally scary movie without one of us going, oh my God, that was so scary, and somebody else going, there was nothing scary about that.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Because our own imagination filled in our worst possible fear in that hole.
I think probably
it's the same situation which is what art is all about.
Yes.
So say, Matt, you and I go to an art exhibit, we can look at the same painting and we're going to take something different from it.
Exactly.
It's still going to impact us. Or if the four of us went out to a show with a band and there's like, oh, I love this song. Oh, why do you like this song? And they're like, because it makes me feel this way. I'm like, oh, really? It made me feel the opposite.
Right.
But that's what I mean about art. That's the beautiful thing about the way that movie was, the cinematography and the directorialship and the writing, to what you had said, was that it gave enough for the audience to participate.
Yes.
The participation from the audience is key, I think, to true art. I
One,
think once you blot that, now I'm getting into a whole other thing, and I won't get into it. But once you take that away, and you give them everything, then it's like, that's why I think you leave the theater feeling more lonely than you did before you walked in. Whereas Salem's Lot, it stays with you. 6 weeks later, you're sitting there going, every time you hear something on the window, you're like, fuck me.
Right.
It better not be that goddamn kid.
And you know what? Right.
It's the tree in the front yard rubbing up against the siding, and you're like, and you're under your covers going like, nope.
But then think about it.
Worst possible scenario is
then go back and go later on in life. Like you look at Poltergeist, right? And the tree was this horrible thing in the window.
Yeah.
Once again, it was another influence. And for myself, kudos for them using the Nosferatu style of vampire, which honestly, up until the Willem Dafoe remake, the Nosferatu wasn't going past the silent film. You weren't seeing that.
That's true. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Once Bela Lugosi played Dracula, that was that was the centerpiece. That was like, this is the standard. We need someone to be that's romantic. We need somebody that mesmerizing, and that's what his allure is, like a spider to a web. And meanwhile, Count Vorlok, or whatever the fuck Nosferatu's name was, that thing was just a fucking beast. And he ate. He was a primal evil, and he ate, and that's what it was. And that was scary. That was scary to me. And quite frankly, going back to what I said earlier, like I said, it's the same face they used in the dream sequence in American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
That scene as a child scared the fuck out of me. Watching because American Werewolf in London, I love werewolves, first off. And that is one of my favorite movies. But that scene, even as I'm going to be 50 this year, even as a 50-year-old man, I still go like this. Like I jump, even though I know it's coming, because it's scary. That is some scary, scary shit. And that's another reason why I said this movie, there's another scene in there, like, and we saw it in that trailer where it's towards the end, and they're getting him. They're getting Mr. Barlow in the coffin, but they're in the basement, and you see that the other vampires are all in that basement, and they're starting to rise. And the kid turns around, and he sees these are, by the way, familiar people that are now vampires. People he knew that are now vampires and are starting to crawl slowly towards him because they're going to fucking eat him. You know what I mean? That was crazy, crazy scary. And I was thinking as a child that the kid's a little older than the kid that was scratching the windows, of course. But like as a child, like how shocking that has to be. Like you're already in over your head with this, because you think
every familiar face is now everybody you felt that you could run to in a situation where you were scared or needed protecting is now not coming to protect you. They are your enemy now.
Right.
They are what is coming to get you.
And it's like all is lost, but it's also like all is lost. I'm now singled out. Like I'm in the minority. The whole town is a vampire. What am I fighting for? I'm going to lose. You know what I mean? It's like, that's even, because it's like you're under the thumb at that point. You know what I mean? It's very oppressive.
And that's why Gen Xers are the fucking kings, man. Because that's what we had. That's what we grew up with.
Right. You ain't fucking kidding, dude.
I mean, listen, I mean, I remember, whether I was walking home from the movie theater after seeing The Shining or whatever, all that shit, like that was ingrained in my head. And they were, I was walking 5 blocks, 6, 7 blocks home.
Right.
It's crazy shit. This is the era of Salem's Lot going into Halloween, into, Nightmare on Elm Street came later, But
Right.
that little cusp of time, the late 70s, early 80s, where it was, we were young enough to think that that kind of stuff could happen in a weird way.
Yeah.
But we weren't. We were out walking around,
Right.
and
It was almost like we had that mentality of like, I hope I see that, but dear God, I hope I don't see that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We were dancing. We were like, as they say, like, kind of like walking the razor's edge, because it's like, that would be so cool if I see that. But yeah, no, it wouldn't.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you a quick crazy story. One night, my buddy and I, like, it was back around that time, 79, 80, somewhere around that time. We had gone to the movie theater there in Media, and we were walking home one night. It was late, and we're standing on the corner. I'll tell you the corner. It was 4th and Monroe in Media, and we're sitting there just chatting. He lived a block one way. I lived 2 blocks the other way, and we're sitting there going, "Hey, man, I'll see you tomorrow. What time?" And then our attention is diverted to a gentleman. This is like, I don't know, it's around midnight, maybe even 1 a.m. There's a guy walking towards us a block away. He's wearing a Michael Myers mask.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Now remember what time it is. And this isn't a kid. This is a grown man. And his, when you walk, there's a gate, his arms are stiff by his side. And we're watching him. We're like, what the hell? Like, we're kids. We're like, look at this guy. What is he thinking he's doing? And he gets closer, and we realize his arms aren't moving. His arms are completely stagnant to his side, and he just keeps coming towards us.
Right.
And we're like, what the? And finally, we couldn't take it anymore. He got right to the curb. He was literally across the street from us. And he stopped. This motherfucker stops. And we're like, there was an and then one step onto the street. Dude, we bolted. We bolted faster than I've never run that fast in my life. And I'm sure it was some dude who probably lived 3 doors down that was like, hey, these kids are talking too loud. I'm going to go fuck with them. That's probably what happened. But I'll tell you something, it was real. And because of this, because of Salem's Lot, because of The Shining, because of Halloween that was relatively still a new movie at that time, it was real to us. It was like, man, it was palatable. You could taste it. And we were kids, but we were like, I'll tell you, I could have won the 100-yard dash in a second, man.
It's kind of like when you in Salem's Lot, and when you read the book, when Ralphie and Danny Glick are walking through the woods and they think they hear something, they're like saying, well, there's no such thing as monsters. Right. But then they say, but there are perverts.
Yeah.
And that's when they start getting scared, because they're going like, it's like, oh, it's a monster. It's not, oh no, but there is
that's the same thing.
But there is real, but the same concept. It's there is real physical stuff that could hurt us. It's not what we're thinking, and that's when you get scared, because because now your brain goes, okay, monsters aren't real, but there is plenty of other crap out there that can hurt you.
That's
and then
true.
but of course, and at that point, as we learn, in the book and obviously in the movie, it's Straker out there to snatch them up,
right?
To take back to the basement of the house,
right?
Because Barlow his crate is being delivered that night.
He needed a Snickers.
Right.
That's right.
Now it's good that you brought that up, Matt, actually, too, because when we come back, we're going to talk about, there was actually a remake of Salem's Lot, which Matt, while we're watching this,
which I did not see, so I'm interested.
I actually did watch it, and not as scary, because it's the lack of practical effects in the sense, or lack of the 70s practical effects, I should say, but still a great cast. Matt's going to bring that up, but we're going to show you a trailer of what really is scary in the woods with these kids we're talking about. We're going to be back with more tonight's TV lineup right after this.
You can't stop me. You're no werewolf.
That's why I always travel in a pack.
Please.
Get him, girls!
Like I said, there's a lot of scary shit.
That is so fucked up on so many levels.
There's just so many scary things in the woods.
You want to grab the person who made that and say, "What's wrong with you?" No, seriously, what is wrong with you?
I would have been like, "Give me the directions to Mr. Barlow's." At that point, you know what I mean? You know.
Oh man!
But once again, yeah, they had.
Where does he find this stuff?
I find it. I do find it. Once again, subscribe DJB Productions Network right down below. We got
just for that.
Just for that alone, I got plenty of this shit. Don't worry about it. I got so much. But yeah, it was Matt. If you have the IMDb list or the cast list, simply for the remake, they had a pretty good cast for the remake. If you want to go down that list,
2004, we had Rob Lowe as Ben Mears, Andre Brower as Matt Burke, Donald Sutherland. Donald Sutherland as Mr. Straker. Samantha Mathis as Susan Norton. Again, most people probably wouldn't recognize her name, but you'd recognize her face.
Yeah.
Rutger Hauer as Mr. Barlow.
Yeah.
James Cromwell as Donald Father Callahan. Let me see.
Was this 2004?
Yeah.
2004, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just again, major names.
Yeah.
In that, I mean, it's like,
and once again, made for TV. I think it was 3 days. I don't think it was like one movie. I think it was like a.
Rutger Hauer.
I'm telling you, the cast list was phenomenal.
I didn't see this remake, but did they have him in makeup?
I believe so. If I remember correctly.
Because Rutger Hauer, he's creepy just on his own.
Yeah,
and if you think he's not, go watch The Hitcher. Go watch the original.
Oh my God, what a classic movie!
Yeah.
Oh man, and yeah, he scares me. Period.
You know what? His delivery in The Hitcher is like a textbook in brilliant, understated delivery that still has the punch. It's like I did some acting for a little while, and I don't know any of the terminology, but there was a way that Robert Duvall had the same effect in certain ways, but Rutger Hauer had a way of just delivering a line that just left you. It affected you, but it left you cold. You were like, "Oh shit!" I felt that. You know what I mean? Like that. And he's so underrated. He was so underrated. I'm excited. Like, I'm looking forward to watching this later tonight. I'm
telling you, if you could stream it.
Oh, look, the theme music was made by me. Except my middle name is different. Yeah, Christopher Gordon.
It's I said earlier, I kind of had like a love-hate with it, but it's the only thing I hate about this original Salem's Lot miniseries.
The 79.
The 79 one. Was and it's kind of nitpicking, but there were certain things in the book that they kind of redid the scene in the movie, but it didn't have the impact.
Didn't work.
Because there was one particular scene in the movie where it's like they kind of come through a doorway into a room, and I think it's actually even kind of like into the basement or somewhere, and I didn't finish watching it last night, so I'm trying to remember exactly what the room was. But it's like the stairs are missing. A couple of stairs are missing. So like in the movie, it's like it's designed so that if you walk through there, you're gonna, trip, you're gonna fall, maybe hit your head, and knock unconscious. In the book, it was the full staircase leading to the basement to where Barlow's coffin was, and it was after like the third or fourth step of a full 12, 13 step, stairwell. And it mentions in the book what nobody notices as they're kind of coming through the kitchen is the butcher's block, the steak, for all the knives in the kitchen is empty. What Straker did was he took all of the kitchen knives, broke the handles off, and shoved them all through pieces of like plywood or whatever. So it was like you walk down, like, the no light to the basement, you would fall from basically the third or fourth step onto the floor, and on the floor, it's nothing but knives.
Right. Yeah.
It's right. All land on knives. So I'm like, the scene opens up, fall, and it's like, oh, it's missing. No, what, So, and again, spoiler alert: if you haven't seen it, cover your ears, do whatever. But his girlfriend Susan, when she becomes the vampire, they find out she's been a vampire, and they go in during the day into the house,
right?
Everything, and then they open up because they're going, I'm going to kill this, and she's in there. And Ben has to, ends up driving a stake through her heart. And in the movie, it's like she somehow lives, whatever, and they're on the run through like South America, and they eventually find her, or she finds that but they're ready for it. But so like there were certain things about the movie that having read the book prior to ever seeing it, because again at 79 we were 5 years old.
You guys were.
Well, you me and Dan.
Maybe you guys were.
You and Jason were had the advantage of being a little bit older. So I mean, I didn't see it when it was originally on TV, but I had the benefit. I read the book, and let me tell you, somebody gave me this great advice. They said when you read the book, go first. Either buy the book or go to the library first thing in the morning. Start reading it first thing in the morning on a rainy day. And it was weird because being in a house by myself and you hear nothing but the rain and reading that book, you want to talk giving you the heebie-jeebies, But then, finally later, seeing the miniseries, there were certain things I felt, kind of, I was a little disappointed in. But overall, it's one of those things where kind of like with a lot of other Stephen King's, well-made adaptations, it also kind of leaves me the thing of like going, I've got the book, which is great on one level. And now I've got the movie that's great in its own right.
Right.
So it's like, it's almost like a win-win thing. So as long as you kind of overlook maybe some of the shortcomings that, once you get to an on-screen adaptation, it's just fantastic.
Now, to answer your question, Rutger Hauer did not don makeup like Mr. Barlow did in the original, just so you know. Okay. And I did happen to find the trailer for the newer one. Okay. So I'm going to play this now for us. Right, this is the trailer from the 2004 edition of Salem's Lot.
I used to think nothing happened here. The truth is, everything happens here.
A dark secret.
When do we meet your partner?
In his own good time. Awakened by a mysterious stranger.
I saw a plastic bag in the back seat. Was it little boy size? It was head size.
This June.
I know your name!
What about the house?
It scares me even to this day.
An old friend is coming home.
Life is such a precious gift. I don't know how to stop it.
Based on Stephen King's best-selling novel.
Let me in, Danny.
What's happening to this town?
Rob Lowe, Andre Braugher, Rutger Hauer, and Donald Sutherland. Salem's Lot. Don't miss 2 nights of suspense, beginning Sunday, June 20th at 8.
I happen to like it here.
Only on TNT.
Nice.
Now I vaguely remember this.
Rutger Hauer, creepy AF.
Oh, and he's a great actor. I mean, he was such a great actor. He was such a great actor. And Donald Sutherland, you can't go wrong with him. Rob Lowe is a vampire because, I mean, the motherfucker never ages at all.
Right?
You know what I mean? Like, if anybody is Count Barlow, it's Rob Lowe with his Atkins.
I think the remake missed the mark. But maybe
No,
it didn't
did.
from the novel. Maybe it didn't from the novel, but from
Well, you know what though? They dropped the campiness, which in a certain way.
What do you mean campiness? There was no
The 70
campiness in the
the seven-
79.
in the 79 one, in a way, you can call it campiness of this over the
The fact
top
that
monster
he
with a
he
blue
wore a
nose for
cape.
Atu. Yeah, he's blue face with a fat. I mean, he looked like a
Well, no,
monster.
he's blue faced because he's not alive. He's the living fucking
And
dead.
it scared the fuck out of me. But I'm just saying,
What
it
I'm
was
saying
like,
is that like that's
they
the
went
whole
the more
point.
romantic route, is what they did. I'm
No,
not saying it's
and I
better.
get that. I get that
Yeah.
too because when
Yeah.
interview with Anne Rice's work
Yeah.
and what she did with Interview with the Vampire definitely reinvented the vampire in that way, which in a lot of ways kind of made it more realistic. Like people have, there was a book written by an author, I can't remember his name, I won't get too deep into it, who actually he writes the book in a basis of factual evidence. Factual, I mean, this is not factual, but that vampires are real. And he creates this whole book based on the fact that vampires are real. So it's kind of interesting. There's two vampires. You've got the romantic vampire that, dresses up and,
Yeah.
nice and sharp, hooks up with the chicks, does this thing. And then you've got what I've always called Barlow, the one that would be the monster, the beast of if there was such thing as the living dead, that needed to feed on the living to survive, that had to be cared for. Like, okay, I've got this specimen that can do all these things, is extremely powerful, but is limited in that power. Then you've got the Anne Rice thing, where it's like these guys are sitting around, like, hooking up with chicks, having parties, which is cool in a way because you get a sense of like, oh man, they're among us. They can live among us. They could be possibly here. So there's these two worlds of vampires. But I didn't think the 79 was a campy version at all. But
I mean, but not in the, I think not in the sense that we would call campy, but if you talk about the audience,
when you say campy, I think like Batman.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I think too. As soon as I say it,
right.
But not what I mean in a sense. But consider 1979 versus 2004. The kids are 2004 are so desensitized to everything, and you're living in a world where Interview with a Vampire is a thing. Dracula's been done 8 million times. Even Bon Jovi fucking fought vampires and blah blah blah. You know what I mean? That type of thing. So I mean, it's like Nosferatu. It's like you almost like, oh, I don't believe this. Oh, you believe the other fucking vampires, but you don't believe this one. You know what I mean? Like that type of thing. So I think they went for
I get it.
What would be bought by the audience.
Yeah. No, you gotta play to your audience. I get it. I get
there's a funny thing. I think it was James Woods. He was on Saturday Night Live, and he was playing Count Dracula, and he's trying to get a meal. He's trying to eat. He's trying to feed, right? And he's going around, and he can't find anybody. He goes, "Oh, you look wonderful," And he's like being like very debonair. And he's talking to these girls, and the girl's like, "Oh, I have diabetes." He's like, "Oh." So he moves on to the next girl, and the next girl's like, like I have like an iron deficiency, blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, all right. Then he goes on, she goes, oh, well, I'm not really good, but like my friend John, like John's really, oh, really? Well, tell me about John. He goes, oh, John's cool, but you don't want John. And she's not saying about eating him, like to be romantic with him. She's like, John will sleep with anybody. He'll sleep with a man, a woman, a dog. He don't care. And he's like, oh, and by the time he finally tries to find somebody, the sun comes out and he melts.
And ironically enough, James Woods in the movie Vampires as a
great
vampire.
Movie, buddy, as a vampire hunter. Yeah. But great movie, guys. This was great. I mean, I once again, if you have the chance to watch Salem's Lot, highly suggest it.
Do it.
And I'm talking, and I mean, watch the second one too. Like there is a return to Salem's Lot.
Yeah.
Which takes place probably a couple years later in the timeline
yes.
of the movie.
Yes.
they go to Mexico. They follow the vampires to Mexico to, once again, they can't just leave well enough and knowing. They got to fucking keep hunting. So they go to Mexico. It's not as well received as the original, but it's definitely worth watching as well.
Well, again, that was one of those ones where it was one of the poor adaptations of King's work.
Yeah.
Because King did do a short story called A Return to Jerusalem's Lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the basis of that story was it's a guy and they're going to Salem's Lot. They don't know what's happened there. They have family there or whatever.
Yes.
And the car, they get stuck in the snow because it's snow and whatever. So the guy ends up like, well, I know there's like a bar or whatever, down the road. So he walks back and says like, hey, can somebody help me? My car broke down. They're like, well, where is it? And he tells them, and like everybody in the bar is like, oh shit.
No.
Yeah.
And a couple guys go out, to help me or whatever. And then the story, kind of goes from there. But yeah, I mean, they said
it's worth it. It's worth watching if you could find. But if you could find the streamings, especially Salem's Lot. I mean, it is one of my favorites. I love watching it. I went out of my way a couple of years ago because I was like, something reminded me of it, and I was like, damn, I want to watch this, and I like desperately found it, and I watched it, and I had so much fun watching it. It's such a great movie.
Got it on Blu-ray, and I'm going to finish watching it after we're done recording.
And come to think of it, though, there's going to be a brand new Nosferatu movie.
Yes.
Coming out, and I think it stars Bill Skarsgård.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, and who's a great actor.
Perfect actor for it.
He's a great actor. You know what I mean? And he did so well with Stephen King's It.
Yeah.
That, like, not that this is going to be Salem's Lot. This is going to be Nosferatu, of course, but what a great person to play what is probably the scariest monster that
we also have to understand something too that is interesting, and I learned this through reading The Dark Tower, and I read every book in The Dark Tower. I became obsessed with this back in the 90s, and I would wait in line for the next book. Everything in The Dark Tower. Now, like they did that one movie,
right?
Which was
it was a shit show. Yeah, it was
shit show.
It was
has nothing to do with The Dark Tower. I read every book immensely, and everything in The Dark Tower pulls every single thing that Stephen King is known for into one thing. Everything Stephen King wrote can be tied to one core. And this is what fascinates me about this. And Salem's Lot's part of that legacy, that narrative that he wrote. And if The Dark Tower is ever done correctly, which would probably take, I don't know, you know how MCU and the Marvel and all these movies did.
That's how you would have to do it.
You'd have to do it that way.
Yeah,
it would take you. You'd have to record. You'd have to film them concurrently, like they did with like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And it would you would have to have like every movie coming out like within like a year and a half of each other.
Yeah,
or do you think it would be better as like a Netflix series?
A series. See, one thing, and it's weird because I was talking about this with somebody today because I was telling them that we were going to be doing this tonight. And I think if they were going to do The Dark Tower the way they did it, with just being a single movie, and it's a shame because I love Idris Elba.
Oh, so
he's great.
Everything he's ever done. I've seen movies that I hate, and he was the good part of the movie.
He was
the only good part of the movie.
You know,
he really was.
And Matthew McConaughey, I wish it would have been better served, I think, if they had not made him Roland, the Roland that any of us that we've read the books, know from the books.
Right.
If they would have maybe done it as a prequel to the books, had him as one of these other gunslingers, because in the world of the gunslingers, they were basically like the Knights of the Round Table, essentially. And if they would have had him be another gunslinger, and it would have been great to have something happen where you find some other great iconic actor that you could have envisioned as being the gunslinger from the books and have it so they kind of at the very end they somehow meet up together, and Idris Elba dies, and you leave this other person playing the Roland from the books, chasing after McConaughey.
Right.
You know, if it would have been more like that battle between the gunslingers and the forces of Randall Flagg.
I want to see a movie where somebody's just chasing Matthew McConaughey, and he escapes in a Lincoln.
Because anybody who ever read the books, and even if you didn't read the books, the first line of the Gunslinger books is the dark man fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. That could have been the ending of the Dark Tower movie. And then it could have set it up where if it did well,
you know
would
what's
have
funny?
set up, a series of movies if you wanted to do it.
Spoiler, that's how the Dark Tower ends.
Which, again, spoiler alert, which is great because I thought it was such a great, I don't know, we're kind of getting off original, but a great literary thing because it ends where it begins, because what is the most logical ending to a book? If you read the book, you read it again. So you start back at the beginning.
Well, that was the same thing that
and the
with
whole series of books.
That's how I felt about the Talisman.
Mm-hmm.
I've read the Talisman 3 times. That's how addicted I was to that story. With Peter Straub and Stephen King co-writing.
Right.
If you have not read the Talisman, all of you, do yourself a favor. Set a time this summer and read that fucking book. It will change your life.
Well, I'm going to set another spoiler alert. The show's over.
Okay.
We're getting so
I didn't want to interrupt either one of you, but I'm like, I need to get the hell out of here. The show's over. Join us next time right here on tonight's TV lineup when we talk about a man who not so willingly became the greatest American hero. Next time, right here on tonight's TV lineup, for Matt Sunner, for Chris Gordon, for Jason Leach, my name is Danny J. Hit that subscribe button, notification bell, and we'll see you same bat time, same bat channel.
This concludes our broadcast day for WDJB Productions.